Hey guys, welcome back. I want to touch on a couple of things here that I think are very important. I hear them used a lot, and um, I I think we really need to take a step back and look at these a little closer, particularly if you're somebody that's using these terms interchangeably. And the terms are technique and principle. And what do those even mean? How do they relate to each other? And how does that really relate to our martial arts? So let's first take a look at principle. And I want to talk in terms of how it relates to our Kihon Happo. Because this is where, at least in my experience, I see that there's a lot of confusion. And I know even myself that, I've gone down that rabbit hole too. But what's really important is to understand that the term Happo means 8 principles, right? And so it's not Hajutsu, it's not 8 techniques. And there's a reason for that. So, and even these things are so important that even our current grandmaster Masake Hatsumi and his teacher Takamatsu have expressed how important these are. That the late Takamatsu even said that these are the root of all martial arts. Why would he say that? What is it about these that are so foundationally, so important that they are the root of all martial arts? Is it really about these techniques? Um, Now, just let's take a step back for a second and let's look at the definition. So, what is a principle? A principle is just simply a foundational truth from which all actions and behaviors are based. So, you have your own personal principles that guide your behavior. There are principles of like an organization's principles that guides its business plans and things like that. So principle just simply means the foundational truth from which everything else is based, right? So that's what controls the actions or guides the actions. What is technique? Well, technique is simply a way to do something. It's it's a technique is a very specific pattern or functional way to achieve a result, to undergo a task or anything like that. So a technique is what comes after the principle. Now, with Kihon Happo, if we look at this as Kihon just means basic, right? Basic. So if we look at Kihon Happo as 8 basic principles, it becomes easy to have many expressions of what we believe that principle to be. It becomes easy to let go of the importance of the techniques that were actually written and taught very specifically as Kihon Happo. And there are people who train that way. At the same time, it's easy to look at these 8 techniques as just 8 techniques, and all you do is focus on the technical aspects of that, and they just become 8 techniques. So not even understanding what the principle is. So the way that my personal opinion on this is the way to approach the Kihon Happo is to first understand the techniques as they are. These techniques very specifically were written a certain way or passed along a very specific way for a reason. That the techniques of the Kihon Happo are the best learning models to understand the principle behind that. So when you look at Ichimanji no kata, for instance, the very first one, Ichimanji, one line, pertains to this one line, that the kamae or the posture you take and how you move should be expressions of that principle. There's a very specific intent and purpose for that. But once you learn that, then it unlocks this principle when it comes to the use of weapons, when it comes to the use of grappling and leverage. This principle takes on a universality of it, a broader significance that can apply to many different techniques. But in the beginning, you have to first learn that technique. It's the same with all of the Kihon Happo. And what's even more interesting is that when you look at the original Kihon Happo, when you look at the Toriti Goho, we know that as the Motegyaku, Motegyakutsuki, Urigyaku, etc., that those didn't even have names. They were just Sono Ichi, Sono Ni, Sono San, number 1, number 2, number 3. They didn't have names. And I think this really expresses a very important point, that even though they were very specific techniques, the names weren't even attributed to that, because it wasn't about the technique as much as it was about the lesson or the point of the technique. And this is pretty much what I'm trying to say here, is that with all these people talking about how this technique should be done this way, or these are the techniques of the Kihon Happo, we should have Gensei Naga in there, we shouldn't, we should have da 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 da. I think we need to come back to why. Why are these techniques there? If they're 8 basic principles, who defined those principles? Why did they define them, or why did they see those important? And is the technique you are doing or practicing, or the way you even understand the technique, is that really the gateway that's going to teach you that principle? So in the beginning, when we're training, we don't know anything, right? We don't understand anything. We're just coming in. And so what the teacher is going to do is they're going to give you a technique. And at a basic level, you're going to learn the technical aspects of that technique. This is where you put your foot. This is how you turn your hand. This is where you need to step to. You're learning these very physical, technical aspects to what you're doing for good reason. It's body development. It's teaching you how to move, how to stand correctly, how to do the technical aspects of that. And that is really, really important. The motor skills, really important. But by practicing that technique, the way it's taught, the way it's passed, it also is leading you to understand a principle. And this is, again, this is gonna touch on my big emphasis on why a technique should be practiced over and over again, the way it's done, and not be so quick to jump to variations and explore creative thought and all this kind of stuff, that really focus on doing something the way it was taught to you over and over and over again, because that process is what's going to unlock the deeper lessons in it that really help you understand the principle behind that. So really the technique and principle relationship is that the technique leads you to understand the principle so that it unlocks all the other techniques. That first you become dependent on this technique to learn the principle. Once you learn the principle, then you're no longer dependent on the technique. Now the technique loses its importance, the principle becomes important, and from that you can do many techniques from that principle. But one leads to the other, and it's a very, very linear path. That people say, oh, there's many ways to get to the top of the mountain. That's true in some things, but when it comes to learning a very deep principle, you're going to create chaos if you try to take many roads at the same time. That there is one specific way that has been passed on from master to student, master to disciple, and passed on through the generations for very specific reasons, because they identified that that particular way is the best way to understand, and not mentally understand in here, in your body as well, to be able to operate from that principle. And with the case of the Kihon Happo, there are 8 principles that represent the basics, the foundation. Could there be more? Absolutely. But there are 8 that are representing as the core. So this technique and principle argument is really, it's really, I don't want to say it's ludicrous, but it really is not helpful. I think it's best to really understand why we're doing the things we're doing. What is the principle that that's trying to teach? And especially in the case of the Kihon Happo, what are those 8 principles? And nobody says you have to learn all 8 at one time. It's okay. Take it one at a time and just practice that. Because even understanding one principle to the level that you can then express it through many techniques connects you to so many incredible things, including the use of weapons and things like that. But the way the Kihon Happo is designed is that when you train with them correctly and you start to understand these principles, then you start to see these principles in the waza or the kata that come later. The tenryaku or the jodan, chudan, gedan, etc. levels of techniques that you see within a school. It connects you to those techniques. You start to see the ichimanji in the koku and things like that. Because you understand the principle. And if your technique is trained correctly, then you're going to express that principle in a tactically efficient and protective and effective way. And this is, again, this starts to touch into my next part on this, is that you can mentally understand a principle, but if your technique is not developed, then it's not going to be effective. So you can understand one line, but if you don't have the flexibility in your connective tissues and your balance and things like that to be able to stand and move in one line, then understanding it up here is useless. It's not going to save you. On the flip side, understanding techniques, if you practice a technique to the degree that you can perform it very well, but you don't really understand the principle behind that, then you're going to be limited to that technique. That's going to be your one expression. You're not going to see it and move like it in anything else. You're not going to be able to apply it in any other way. So both of them are very dangerous. So it becomes this kind of symbiotic relationship, this polarity between technique and principle. But one has to come first in order to unlock the other one, and once the other one unlocks, then everything else unlocks from there. So that's just my opinion based on my decades, and it took me a long time to really truly understand that. But I think that's a very healthy approach, and I hope that you find some value in that, and it helps shed some light on your training. Don't be so quick to think you understand something. Always have an open mind. But that's why you have to continually keep training, because these things become more obvious. The light bulbs go off, things like that. But if you're constantly jumping around from this or that, and like a kid in a candy store, you're just this technique, that technique. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, now I can do this, and then you're not really. You're just entertaining yourself, but you're not really getting to the root of that. So thank you for watching. I hope that you found this valuable. I'm going to continue to put out some more videos. I'm trying to reconsider what I'm doing here. What is the purpose of me with this channel? It's kind of turning into this vlog of sorts, and I've had a lot of people tell me they appreciate that. So I will continue to put out videos as I find ideas or topics that might be useful. If you have any ideas, things you would like me to make a video on, let me know. Throw it in the comments and I'll see what I can do. If I'm going to do it, or if I choose to do it, then I will certainly make that happen. But if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and like the videos that you like. Throw me some comments. I love feedback. And as I always say, no matter what, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep training.